Welcome to Season 2 of Common Time Podcast. I'm David Clemmer.
And I'm John Pasquale.
And we're back to inspire and empower music educators with practical advice, thought-provoking conversations, and stories from some of the best in the business. Let's dive into another incredible episode. Our guest today is Barry Hauser. Welcome, Barry.
Hey, thanks for having me, John and David. Appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. So Barry is the Director of the Marching Alumni and Associate Director of Bands at the University of Illinois. And today we're going to be talking with him about high school students and how we keep them interested and engaged so that they continue throughout college. So John, why don't you get us started?
Indeed. Hi, Barry. It is so good to see you. I have to say, you are the master at this. There is probably no one better at getting students to participate in college band, from students that are wanting to study music, especially students that aren't. And so this conversation topic, there is no one better. So thank you for your time. I'm just going to dive right in. So what are some of the biggest factors that are going to influence whether students are going to continue participating in band after high school or not, from your experience?
Yeah, well, thank you for those very kind words, John. They mean the world to me, and we're just trying to be like you, so I appreciate that. But, I think there's a number of factors that go into this, and I think so often, maybe in the past we looked at this as a one-way street, and I think a lot more of us are looking at this as a two-way street, right? So as opposed to, hey, you should come to this institution because of who we are, I think there's a lot more of what do we have to offer those students overall. So I think that's kind of like a overlying umbrella, if you will, when we look at that. But I think so much of that honestly has to do with, what has their time been like in high school? Has it been enjoyable? If it hasn't been, the likelihood of them wanting to continue in college probably isn't going to be very high. I think another one are the opportunities that we have to offer in college, right? Are we providing offerings that appeal to the students based on what they've experienced in high school, or maybe what they haven't experienced in high school? So I think there's some factors there that play into that. And I think the difficult part for us, and we may chat about this a little bit later, is how do we, as the college directors, relay or get that information to the students? Because oftentimes I find that that's one of our challenges. We don't get access to everyone to kind of beat some of these misconceptions that they have about college band. I think another one is like time commitment, academic demands, right? Everyone's, I'm going to be in this really rigorous academic major. I'm not going to have time to do that. So I think there's some things there that play into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I taught high school many years ago, but in kind of thinking back on that, like those are exactly what it's like, yep, those resonate with me. And I'm curious now. So thinking about how you, from your perspective, looking at both music majors and non-music majors, what could we say specifically to band directors to encourage their students to continue? Like, what's the message that we can, from your perspective, and then honestly, for anyone that's out there, like, how do we keep this momentum going?
Yeah, I think there's a misconception, as I kind of said before. So just our high school colleagues really relaying to their students that you don't have to be a music major to participate in college. We fight that a lot. And also the college experience may be pretty drastically different than what you experience in high school, especially if you've done the whole competitive thing, which, that's a whole nother episode right there, right? There's lots of positives that go with that, but there's also, if not done right, can be kind of a negative to where we suffer some burnout and we don't want to continue with music. So I think that's a big one right there, that so many people think, well, I have to major in music to participate. So I guess I'm not going to be a music major. I'm going to go into engineering. So now I can't be in the marching band or any of the concert ensembles.
So speaking of, Barry, what is the percentage of music major to non-music major in the Marching Alumni?
Yeah, I think we're pretty fortunate here. Over time, these numbers, I think music ed numbers were probably a little higher, but we still have a pretty high percentage. We're at 20% are music majors.
That's great.
And then the other 80%, like a lot of us, especially at the bigger institutions, have every academic discipline represented. A lot of engineers,
And David, how about you at Kansas? Whenever you were there, do you remember?
It was about the same. It was changing as I took over, but they were required, music education majors were required to do 1 year at that time.
Oh.
So we always had them, but I was looking at how do I keep those music majors beyond 1 year. So I really spent a lot of time focusing on incentivizing the second and third and fourth years for them, whether that was leadership positions or just different ways to get them involved and create this desire and honestly pride of being in the group. Like, we don't want to leave this. Like, we're glad we're here. But as I continued and did more recruiting, it was largely non-majors. And that was my focus actually when I went into high schools, was talking to, raise your hand if you're going to be a music major. Excellent. Now I'm going to talk to everyone else that didn't raise your hand. Because that's really, that was my bread and butter. Like, the music ed majors were going to come to us anyway. I needed the others. So yeah.
Here at Michigan, we have 94% of our students are non-music majors.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's interesting about the time commitment piece, right? Because everyone, like, I'm going to study this and this and this. I don't have time to do band. For any band director listening, we actually do a study every year of our students' grades. And over the last couple years, I can say that our students have had a 92.7%, or I'll say it this way, 92.7% of our students had a higher GPA in the fall term when they were in marching band than the term that they were not. Right. So because they are forced to budget their time, they're forced to be very thoughtful about every activity that they do. Now, us as college band directors have to be very organized and thoughtful about all of those things. But assuming that all happens, those students absolutely have time. And you're talking about students that are engineers, going to put things on Mars, cure cancer, sustainable water systems in Africa. I mean, pick your thing, right? But it's absolutely doable. I truly believe.
It is. And John, we're right there with you too, just to continue on that academic side, because there are so many misconceptions about that. Our students have a better GPA in the fall than they do in the spring when they have more time.
Yes.
They have to manage their time so much
by
more.
A significant margin. Significant margin.
Right. Like, our average GPA is a 3.7 on a 4.0 scale in the fall.
Amazing.
And then in the spring, I don't know what they're doing. That's not my responsibility. No, it is. But, right? But I think they don't have to schedule their time so much. So
then, Barry, just to continue on that, for some other misconceptions that students may have about college band.
Yeah, I think, there's some. I think, and this may be more of a factor still. So I'll kind of dip into both questions there, if that's okay. I think sometimes there's even the financial side that, I was able to use an instrument from my high school, and now I don't have an instrument to use in college. And I would say that, so of those larger instruments, majority of our college institutions, our colleagues, they're going to provide that. And you're probably not going to have any type of instrument fee that maybe you did in high school. So I think there's that financial side that isn't as pressing. That is another misconception. So I think that's another big one as well. I think still just getting into the class schedule side of things, I just feel like it's time commitment, yes, but also that they're not going to be able to find time to get to rehearsal and do all the things that what they think they need to do at a high level. And yes, we still ask for high expectations in what we do, right? We have to. We have thousands upon thousands of people. You have thousands more than what we do. But, in looking at that, from making sure that we put performances out there that are going to be at a really high level, but we have formulas in place. We're not going to be learning 100 pages of drill for a 1 week show. And that 1 week show could be a WEEK.
Could you imagine?
WEAK. It may be a 1 week show just to get that onto the field, right? No. But there's a lot of truth with that.
That's so funny.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm curious. We kind of talked about, there's misconceptions, but for someone that's not going to major in music, what are some of the benefits of joining collegiate band? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think right away, first of all, they get to continue music. That's an important thing, right? We as public school educators, if we've had those experiences in the past, I know when I taught in the public schools, that's all I wanted for my students. Of course, I celebrated those that wanted to go into music. I questioned them. Are you sure you want to do this?
And it's important to do that.
Yeah.
But it's real important. But then the other part was just like, even if you don't major in music, find opportunities to to continue to do that. So it's that lifelong appreciation of music. But, I think one of the things that we all talk about, the folks that have really figured it out, everything that we do is about people. It's about relationships. And if we can make sure that we're providing an environment that they can get plugged in before we hit that first day of classes. So if it's a week of preseason camp, training camp, band camp, whatever you call it, and you have, 300 instant friends or 50 instant friends, whatever the size of your group is, the success rate and their experience is just so much greater and so much more positive. So, that's a big focus. And
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
we're not alone in that. I think there's lots of folks that do that have figured this out, but that's so key to our student success and being plugged in and network.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, we've talked about on the podcast, we've had several guests come on, and the topic of culture has come up. And it's even in the high schools, how do you develop a culture of, lifelong learning and music and so forth, and lots of different aspects of that. But I think what you just said is spot on. There is a culture in collegiate band that if you've had that culture in high school, it's different in the college at the college level, but it is a continuation of that family feeling. I mean, I absolutely would agree with you there.
Without
Like
question.
that's a part of it. And going to college can be very scary.
Mm-hmm.
You're leaving home, all of the things that come with that. There's excitement to it, but also like it can be quite overwhelming. And just to your point, college, the culture that you're creating there is spectacular. And that's absolutely God, what a great thing to hammer home. I'm curious, do you have thoughts on how directors can communicate those kinds of benefits effectively to their students? Obviously you think that, I think that, I'm sure John thinks that, but how do we get that message out from high schools, or something that we can encourage our listeners, like, hey, here's something you could do ongoing with high school kids?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of things, right? And I think part of this gets back to that two-way aspect that I talked a little bit about at the beginning, that I think long ago, we were like, high school directors, come to us, right? And, we were expecting people just to knock down the doors, and maybe they did back then. I don't know. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. But I guess I look at it now of like making sure that we're creating relationships with those band directors, right? So are we providing programming for them, professional development? Can I come in and work with your band, and, don't worry about me giving you an invoice at the end of that. I think too many people get caught up in some of those things. And part of what we do is recruitment, engagement. So I think building those relationships, any events that we hold on our campus or other things that we're responsible for, we have a number of, we have a band day that really serves those band programs that do not do anything competitive. And then we host the Illinois Marching Band Championships, which that's very competitive marching band. So the first one includes about 2,000 high school students from across the state and some folks in Indiana. The second one, on the marching band competitive side, that's 6,000 performing students every year. And so that's just two events that is already built in. So you're already impacting, we hope, in a positive way, 8,000 students there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think there's some things there, but I think the big part, again, building those relationships, it's just now with those band directors, because I feel, I didn't think about this when I was a high school director, but I guess I realize now that those high school directors are the ones that are often telling their students where to go and where to study, especially if they're looking at anything in music or if they're looking at music participation, right?
Absolutely.
I talk about this a lot, but we at Michigan, we have a 3-prong approach to recruiting students. We actively go after students. We actively recruit their band directors, and thirdly, their parents. And they're all done simultaneously, but they're all done separately, because I think that having it from every angle is such a critical piece to this, right? But none of it's going to work if the culture doesn't work. Yeah. If the culture is bad, it doesn't matter. That's what I think. I mean, Barry, your ensemble sounds so good, but I think like what puts it at the top of the scale in every regard is the culture that's created there. I mean, you are the master at creating a band culture, because every time I've ever seen your ensemble interact, which has been a lot, it's just like, wow, it's incredible what you get out of these students, and just inspire them, but inspire them in a, I'm going to keep you safe, but not comfortable way. Yeah. Right. Because you're going to learn every day. You're going to get better every day. By the way, that may be uncomfortable, That's all going to happen while I'm keeping you safe, of course, right? So that's just kind of something to think about. But every time I have this conversation, I kind of think about that, going, this is really interesting, because it doesn't matter if the culture sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I don't know. There's so much, and we talk about this a lot. I mean, who out there has said that I want to be part of a bad band? Right?
Right.
I share this with our students a lot. And so that bad band doesn't necessarily just mean that, you're winning trophies and championships and things like that. It's everything. It's those everyday victories that we have. I think we get so caught up in going to, and again, I sound like I'm anti-competition. I'm not, because I get that. There's a place. But, sometimes we get so caught up in, well, we won the national championship and we've won this first place trophy. You know what? What happens when one of your students just finally, after 3 weeks of working on something, achieves the thing that they've been striving for? And so, if we celebrate those everyday victories a whole lot more, then at the end of the day or at the end of the week, we're performing at a much higher level as an organization, which means that we're going to have some great success, whether it be at a game or whatever, travel or whatever the case may be. So I think when we focus on the present, not to get too wrapped up in the culture conversation, but when we focus on the present, as opposed to, I wish we could be this, I wish we could do that, I wish we could go there. What are we doing right now? Because those things are going to contribute a great deal to all those aspirations that we have down the road.
Yeah.
Indeed.
I'm glad you're saying culture, honestly, because it's come
important.
up several times, but I'm getting the feeling for me and listening to you and others that have been on our podcast that a lot of the things that you're trying to accomplish, the culture will lead to those accomplishments. Yeah. Like if you're creating that culture, then you're going to see the advancements, you're going to see the progress, and you're going to see those daily wins that are going to end up being large wins for the students, for the program. So I love it. You don't have to. You can talk about culture all you want.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Indeed. So on that topic, I'm going to change it just ever so slightly, because now we're all talking to prospective students, and there are 1,000 questions, and they're all outstanding. Mm-hmm. We're currently, I don't know about you, but almost every conversation that I have with the prospective student, the first question is about the audition process. Yeah. There's a stigma there about, I'm auditioning for college, I have to be able to play high, loud, and fast. In fact, don't do those things. That's just my opinion, and that's my advice to them. However, do you have any advice that directors can give their students to help them navigate the audition process and just about all of that?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, John. I mean, I don't know. I try and get my mind wrapped around some of these things of, okay, in high school, we were focusing on maybe all state auditions and all district and all these different things that they have to prepare for. And I think there's so much stress with those things that all of a sudden we say college and we think, oh my gosh, this is now times 100 for everything that I've done. And I'm right there with you. I mean, it doesn't have to be the most difficult piece. Doesn't have to be the highest range that you've got. It's really just put your best foot forward, pun intended, and be certain that, we are producing. And if you're doing it through video, don't create a new audition piece, right? Just because it's going to be college. If you're already working on a solo, take an excerpt from that. I mean, we typically look at something technical, something lyrical, and so forth. So anyway, point being, do your homework, I think, is a big part. So the schools that you're looking at, dig in a little bit. And I know it requires us to do a little clicking on some websites and some reading, but there's some great resources out there that I think most of our institutions and colleagues have. So we get this question a lot as well. And so if you're looking at the marching band side, do a search for marching band for that particular institution and look at what those audition requirements are. You're going to probably find that they're a whole lot easier than what you thought they were going to be. Maybe a couple scales, a chromatic scale, and 2 to 3 minutes of an excerpt, and off you go. Some colleges, they don't require auditions at all, and it's kind of come y'all band, and those are great too. So I think a big part of this is planning ahead. And I think a big part of that also is communicating with our band directors and encouraging them to communicate with their students that, hey, you may be stressing out about this, but these auditions are not as difficult as you think. And you need to do this because you're highly likely you're probably going to make at least one of the ensembles within some of the offerings that we have here.
Right.
And I also tell prospective students almost every meeting, you're going to miss 100% of shots you don't take.
Yeah.
Obviously, those are not my words, but in design, you're going to miss 100% of shots you don't take.
Yeah, that's so true.
It's very true.
Barry, you mentioned communicating with directors, and so I want to ask you a question about that because we have a colleague. John and I wrote a book with a colleague in Germany. His name is Christoph Breitach, and I asked Christoph during the writing process.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we're proud of it.
Should be. Yes.
I asked him during the writing of that. We were just, the process. Sometimes you got to take a break, and we took a break. And we're just talking about music in general. And I asked him something to the effect of like, what would make you feel successful as a band director? And without hesitation, he said, if my students are continuing to play their instruments 10 years after they have left me, then I feel like I have been a successful teacher for them. And it really kind of struck me because I was like, I don't know that I would have answered that first. Like he was like, boom. Yeah. So, and you mentioned a few minutes ago, like that's kind of one of the things that we hope for our students, that they are going to continue to play. They're going to continue to engage in the arts. So part of that, we're kind of talking about communication with directors. How do, you mentioned the two-way street. Sorry, I'm kind of bouncing things. Yeah. There's a bunch of things bouncing around in my head here. The two-way street of us kind of going to them, but how do we to encourage them also to create a stronger pipeline for student participation to us? Like how can we do that? Because realistically, I have to believe that most of them really do want their students to continue.
Yeah.
And if we're opening up the two-way, what can they also do to help us help them, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay. I was like, it's bouncing around. It's going to come out in a minute.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think there's so many different levels to this. And so, I think from the high school director side of just kind of normalizing the continuation of playing in college, right? Instead of, I think oftentimes we look at this is the exception. Oh, wow, I had 5 students that continued in college. Maybe this isn't the best example for every program, but just like, you start band or you start in music in middle school, and the hope is that you're going to play in high school.
Right.
And so it's kind of an expected thing. And it's kind of more of the exception that we have some folks that kind of decide not to do that. And so, but for whatever reason, when we look at the matriculation from high school to college, it's like, well, maybe we'll have 5 or 6 people that are going to play. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do. And again, this is part of that two-way street of high school directors. One of the things that we do in our communication with directors, and it's all about student-centered. And I know it's the same thing for you guys, just knowing who you are and so forth. And I think this is the easy equation and why we focus so much on people and why this contributes to a positive culture. But we send a postcard, yes, old school printed snail mail postcard of a picture of every student that has been in the Marching Illini, currently, I should say, and we send a custom postcard to that high school director. And on that postcard, it has, so these are going out next week for us. And it says, join the Marching Illini in 2025. It's got a QR code, goes straight to all of our audition information. But the highlight of that postcard is that student who's an alum of that high school program. And those high school directors, it just warms my heart. Every time I go in and either doing a clinic or a talk or whatever, I walk in there and I see some of these postcards, some of them dating back to 2012.
Yeah.
And they just have their wall of fame, right? And I didn't spend a ton of money to create all these posters to highlight just the program. We're highlighting the people that make up our program. And so we're educating those directors that, look, your students are continuing in music in college, which they love. But then for those students that may have this feeling of, I'm not good enough, or I'm from this school in a really small town, and we just don't do things like that. And they see one of their own up there on the wall, and they think, oh my gosh, there's a direct path.
Yeah.
One of the biggest celebrations that we had here, it's taken a while for us to break into the Chicago public schools, to have some students from CPS that were participating in the Marching Illini. And there's a lot of factors with that and a lot of things we really have to break down and make more accessible. But part of their program there, some of them can't start band until ninth grade. So they're significantly behind everyone else, right? So what are we doing on our audition side? That's a whole nother conversation there. But we made that breakthrough. And of course, we celebrated that student, and that postcard went out. And I can't tell you the number of texts and emails that I got, not only from those students, but from the parents and the directors. And it's just, that's what it is. And so when we focus on the people in our program and the people that help this process, those directors, those middle school directors, those elementary teachers that make this happen, and, our alums, continuing to stay engaged with them so they have positive things to say about our programs because they experience something positive in our program. I mean, it's constant, right? These folks, I know I'm sorry, the
No, I love
soapbox
it.
is stepping up. But, when we look at this, these folks that say, well, okay, recruitment starts now. I said, you're behind. Like, recruitment is every day. Engagement is every day. Culture is every day. And so all these things that we do, they're all connected. And if we look at it as recruitment season, it just doesn't work.
Yep.
It doesn't work. And it can't be just about what we need for our programs either. We do need those things. I'm not trying to, de-stress that. But we've got to make sure that we have just wonderful people that make up our programs. And then when you ask them to do the things that we need them to do, they feel like they are in a safe environment, that they're appreciated, and they'll fly to the moon for you. It's amazing.
Yep.
It's also interesting for any college directors listening to this. I also think it's important for us to help each other out. So as I'm talking to prospective students, I don't just talk about Michigan. I talk about all the Big Ten bands, other bands around the country. Just because all students need to be looking at all of our programs. And I mean, because there are 1,000 factors that are going to go into school choices, right? And I think we're all stronger if we all support each other. And that's something that I feel extremely passionate about. Because there are often times in these prospective student meetings, people are like, why are you talking about other programs? I'm like, because they're fantastic. If you don't go to school here, doesn't mean that there's not another really phenomenal band program there. So like, do that and encourage each other. Also, I would beg. I say the word beg very carefully. High school teachers to have an open mind about sending students or encouraging students to attend a place that could be a rival of yours or of your home institution. Or, I mean, just keeping in mind that students are hungry and they're going to listen to what you have to say. And it's really important to choose those words carefully. So
I love
talk
that.
about it. So I've got a significant soapbox about this one, but it's, I do think that it's very important. So, I'm going to piggyback on that just a second, Barry. Have a question about the stigma of college marching band and pep bands and athletic ensembles. While that's not so much a focal point of this upcoming question, feel free to dive into it. But what role do college marching bands and athletic ensembles, pep bands and such have in either attracting or retaining students in collegiate programs?
Collegiate music programs, especially.
Music programs, for sure,
yeah. I mean, I think we've all experienced, too, this is the reality of the situation. I think we have, if our collegiate programs, athletic programs are housed under the School of Music, we probably have a lot of different emotions and feelings from some of our music colleagues. And I'll just leave it at that. So, in that, it's really important, I feel, when we look at these things, that our non-music majors still feel like they're part of the music community. And it's unfortunate because sometimes there are schools of music, there'll be a lot of barriers for our non-music major friends. Like, I can't get a locker. I can't use a practice room because I'm not a music major. And so oftentimes, specifically within the athletic bands, I think there's a little bit more of an accessible path of joining. Sometimes the audition process, like we talked about before, that could be maybe slightly a barrier for some, but we need to make sure we knock that down as well and just go for it. So I think it's a great recruitment tool for the university. There's so many of our students that are maybe legacies, that they've had family members in our programs and they just have had this lifelong dream to be in, said organization. So I think there's a lot of things that go along with that. I think a big part of this as well is, once again, the sense of belonging and community. Especially for our larger schools. This applies to every school, whether it's small, medium, large. But if we're talking about an institution that has 60,000 people and you're part of a select group of 400 people, and you make 399 friends in that 1 week before you start your first day of classes, and you automatically have a boost. There's a confidence about you, and you know that there's people looking out for you, especially if we've done this culture thing right. That it's not your first year in the band and you have to jump through all these other hoops just to be a member of the band, right? So, and looking at that, I think that's another example there. The leadership and professional growth that we can offer specifically within athletic bands. Yes, we've got principal players in our concert ensembles, but kind of a different groove there. When we look at what we are able to offer within our athletic band programs, there's a lot more opportunities, whether a business major, chemistry major, music ed major that you get to put into practice with your section, maybe a particular music warm up or a rehearsal technique. I don't see any of our other opportunities, sometimes even in our schools of music, offering this type of raw experience and instant feedback. And of course, the performance and travel opportunity. There's lots of great things there that go along with that. But, I think there's so many different things that we have to offer. And the role of the marching band and the athletic bands just seems to be one of the people, if you will, that you feel like you can join that. I think there's a natural association, especially if you're a sports fan, that you get to cheer on your team while being there. Some great seats typically. So many benefits.
Oh, absolutely. The marching band it's one of those. John mentioned a stigma, but I still believe the marching band is sort of it's like a cultural ambassador for the entire university. It's engaging students, it engages alumni, it engages the broader community. And in some ways that community could be local, regional, national, international. Like there's so much. And you mentioned opportunity for the students that are going to be in that. Obviously, we're talking about continuing after high school, and we hope everyone that's playing an instrument wants to take a shot at doing that. And so, for the directors that are out there, like, first off, Barry, thanks so much for this conversation. Like, I love hearing this.
Thank you.
It's inspiring to hear just the thought of students continuing in the collegiate world, whether or not their music majors are relevant, just getting them out there, and then you creating that culture and inspiring that kind of culture is fantastic. So we're about to wrap up here, but I have a kind of a final question to that point. If you could give one single piece of advice to a high school band director that wants to see more students that are continuing after graduation, what would that be?
I think this is a tough one because we can share so many different things, right? But I think I'm going to go back to a comment. At least today, I'm going to go back to a comment that I mentioned earlier, and it gets back to culture. But let's create a culture where continuing after high school is the norm and not the exception.
Normalize it. Yeah.
Normalize it. Normalize that idea. Highlight the alumni of the program that they have come from, especially those non-music majors, of what they're doing in college, and share that with your current students. Expose your students to all these different opportunities that a variety of colleges offer, whether it be band day or something on campus. And if you can't do that, then invite a college director to come in. And whether it's just to say hi, whether it's to talk a little bit about the experiences of, college participation. To John's point, oftentimes when I get asked to do those talks, I may have an Illinois pin on or the black eye here. I very rarely talk about Illinois. I'll talk about collegiate band. Right. And usually, John, same thing. My last statement to any prospective student is, where else you looking? I said, I'm not digging to persuade you to be here, but it's because if I know somebody's looking at the University of Michigan or, anyone else, I'm going to say if you decide to go there, you're going to be in great care because this individual does fantastic work and they're going to provide this amazing culture. It's going to be fantastic. So we may compete on the gridiron, right? We may compete on the court, but when it comes to what we do in band, like we're in this together. And I think you're going to find that for those listening, you're going to find that in probably greater numbers and percentages than what we experience at any level. Our collegiate network is just so tight and we want to be supportive of one another.
Yeah. Let's normalize that. I love it. I think that's a fantastic goal, is to start thinking and talking about normalizing continuation, not it being the exception. Like that should become real. So yeah, awesome.
All right. Well, so Barry, we asked 2 questions of all of our guests on the podcast, and I'll take the first one. Is there a book or books that have particularly inspired you through your teaching journey?
Ooh, yeah. I like to read quite a bit, especially about culture and leadership. So I think one of the ones that I'm really hung up on now that just really does so much in terms of creating this culture is one by John Gordon called The Energy Bus.
I don't know that. I've written that down.
Yeah, it's an easy read, which maybe that's why I like it. But he does so much in terms of life lessons through the sharing of some type of folk tale. And there'll be a lesson that goes along with it. And so there's a story, but as the story develops and as it goes through, you hear about some of the life principles. And it's strictly all about culture that we create and how we can create that paradigm shift. If someone feels like they're living in a culture of negativity, maybe if we just take a little bit different perspective, we realize it's not as bad as we thought.
Fantastic. I'm going to look that one up. I love culture books. I love books and especially if they tell a story, like a kind of an allegory, if you will. And yeah, I love it. Final question is perhaps, very honestly, the most difficult and challenging for everyone. And that is, what is your favorite time signature?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Very serious.
That's a really good one. Yeah. Whew.
There are no wrong answers, except there is a right answer.
But there's better answers, right? Yeah. I'm going to go with the good 7/8.
All right.
Wow. Okay.
7/8.
I like the groove. And again, don't pin me down if it's like 2 + 3 + 2 or anything like that. But, yeah, I don't know. There's just something about that typically some of the pieces that have that, there's a nice groove that goes along with that. Just changes it up.
I think you're in good company. If I remember correctly, our first episode of the podcast was with Jerry Junkin, and Jerry's was 7/8.
It was 7/8.
Yeah, he
must be an airy type thing. So I don't know. Yeah.
Who knows? Hey, Barry, we so appreciate your time today. It's been fantastic talking with you about this really important topic. So thank you for being on. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thanks for doing this and impacting the profession and for those listening in such a positive way. We need more things like this. So appreciate you both doing this.
Thanks, Barry.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Common Time Podcast. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and we'd love it if you shared with your friends as well. We'll see you next time, but until then, keep making music and keep making a difference.